if we came back 6 months ago, mid-season, Chris Bell.
He's top 10 if we do it 6 months ago.
I think he's in that top tier conversation. 6'2", 220. The comps that were scattering all over Twitter this year was AJ Brown. Like, hold your horses, homeboy.
Yeah, I love Chris Bell. I mean, I got myself in trouble with Brett. I would text him. I'd be like, look at AJ Brown out here. He'd sort of slow my roll there, but it had a couple of like squint and look like AJ Brown plays on his tape. Redraft ends, but Dynasty is life. I'm Theo Gremminger. Welcome back to Dynasty Life. Repeat guest. I got him back. It's an annual tradition for me. This time of year, I have to podcast with Cody Carpentier of Roster Watch. Cody is not only very, very knowledgeable about Dynasty rookie drafts, but he's also one of the best NFL experts in the fantasy space. Cody's constantly grinding through the entire draft class, and Cody has locked in at this point on a number of these prospects. And Cody, I also like it because, you know, you're willing to push your guys up the board. You're willing to flag plant. You're looking at these guys and their talent at the NFL level, and you're willing to take them maybe a few spots higher than quote-unquote consensus at this point. But we're post-Senior Bowl. The NFL Combine is right around the corner. You're headed to Indianapolis. How excited are you for that?
I'm always excited to get to Indianapolis, and it's a long week. It's, you know, I remember the first couple. So this is my 5th year. I'm going with Alex. It'll be his 15th year, I think, or 14th in 15 years. I think the COVID year was a skip, but everybody skipped that. And it used to be where you'd only need to be in town for like 3 days. And now we get there on Monday and we leave on Sunday. So it's a full week in Indianapolis, hoping the weather is a little bit better than, you know, that cold front that came through the entire country during Senior Bowl week. But it's always good to get up there, a couple steakhouses, a couple of nice spots, late night, and you get to see some people and have some conversations. And then, of course, you get to see now. You didn't used to get to be on the field and watch these guys run and stuff, and now you get to go out there and we grade all the routes and watch all the running and do all the fun stuff. This is what the job is my favorite. This is my favorite part of the job. I think my favorite week is Combine week of the entire calendar. Football, fantasy, NFL draft, college, whatever it is. I think it's.
Let me ask you this: this year, when we're talking about the NFL draft, there's, you know, I just recorded with your guy Alex Dunlap and as well as Brett Whitefield over on the 2026 NFL Draft podcast. We did an NFL mock draft. Cody and I are taking it from a dynasty lens today. But Cody, when you look at like the draft class as a whole, where a lot of these like people that are experts in the field are saying maybe there's guys, maybe 15 guys with a true first round grade, maybe 13 for some, maybe north of 18 for some, but sub 20 true first round picks. Do you think that this is a year that the Combine matters more on the calendar for, like, especially the NFL teams trying to sift through what matters with this class?
Yeah, I mean, the class in as a whole is a little underwhelming. Like, there's positions that are strong, like edge I think is strong, receivers strong enough, tight ends got some guys, but the interior of the offensive line isn't that great at the top end, especially some second round guys. Like I don't think running back, I'm sure you've talked about this, I don't think running back is really that good outside of Jeremiyah Love. There's a couple of guys you can pick your flavor, but even some people's guy Kalen Black from Indiana didn't even get an invite to the Combine. So it's like things like this where it's the class that just shows you kind of how shallow the class is. People have Kalen Black as like a top 10 back, and it's like that dude didn't even get a Combine invite. So it's kind of like that. I think it's going to be important for those positions, but as always, we're going to be out there watching like the edge guys having freakish combines. There's going to be a couple of receivers, always a couple of corners, big long safety from TCU, Bud Clark, things like this, and then of course, the quarterback position, which we found out earlier this week that Mendoza is not going to be throwing at the Combine, rather his pro day. But we're still going to get to see Drew Aller's big arm. He's been in hiding for what feels like 6 months. Nussmeier, you're going to get to see Klubnik. All these different guys are going to be on the field together throwing. So I think that's going to be kind of the biggest, hopefully the biggest takeaway is we will really find out what a class that we once projected with Nussmeier and Klubnik and Aller and now Mendoza, and Ty Simpson. It's like what we once thought was maybe going to be a good quarterback class. I think the NFL is going to finally figure out, all right, this is your last chance. Now you're all compared to each other on the same field. So I think that's going to be probably be the biggest thing for teams in Indy next year.
You mentioned the running back class where we have a really elite prospect in Jeremiyah Love, and then there's a handful of players that I know that I like, but I think there's a lack of clarity as to the running back 2 is in the class. As some people, it's Jonah Coleman, Jadarian Price. There's some steam for Mike Washington. Certainly the Penn State backs both have their fair share of backers. Right now, who's your RB2 in this draft class before we even do this rookie draft exercise? If you had to pick one, Cody, instead of putting a couple into a bunch.
That's the problem. So I went on the show you were formerly co-hosting on, Sonic Truth. I now co-host that with Matt Kelly. We had the show last week talking about it, and Matt asked me, he's like, can you put these guys in tiers? Let's have this conversation. And I said, well, Jeremiah Love's in tier 1. And then he goes, what about tier 2? And I said, next tier, please. We skipped through tier 2. There's nobody in tier 2. And then went to tier 3, and I listed like 5 dudes. Because I haven't gotten, I think the combine's going to go a long way for us. I've had Nick Singleton in the 2 spot. I've had Kaytron Allen in the 2 spot. Long ago, I thought about Jonah Coleman there from Washington. And recently coming out of the Senior Bowl, I'm kind of leaning towards Mike Washington from Arkansas potentially being in that chair. 6 foot, half inch, 228 pounds. I think he's going to run low 4.5s, hopefully. Really good open field runner, one cut, kind of reminded us of Clinton Portis. He showed a little bit of Adrian there. I really hesitate to say things like this. I don't want to be the guy that says the big time comps, and I'm not, but it was really tough to find a comp for Mike Washington at the Senior Bowl and walked away with a Clinton Portis after going through tons of guys like Carlos Hyde and stuff. But interesting note, we thought he was 24 and a half years old, going to turn 25 this year. He's actually 22 and a half, going to turn 23. We got verification on his age this last week too. So I think that's only going to help push me. So to give you an answer without walking all the way around the block, which I just did, it's probably going to be Mike Washington until proven otherwise at the current stage and dealing with the Nick Singleton broken foot situation.
Yeah, Mike Washington, there's a ton of steam right there. And Singleton certainly would have been a player that I think could have put up huge numbers at the combine, misses out on that opportunity. That definitely hurts him. Well, we're going to see where Mike Washington goes, as well as the rest of these rookies when we get started in this Dynasty rookie draft. Cody, if you had to pick from a fantasy football perspective, do you agree with sort of the general consensus? Wide receiver, is that the class that could really lift the values of this Dynasty rookie picks that are coming up? Or are you on the wide receiver train? Tight end a little underrated as well.
I think tight end's fine. Personally, I would say, yeah, I mean, receiver has to be what carries the boat this year. It has to. And we can't have these guys, have poor combine performances, injure their analytical profiles, because the quarterback class, as we know, is not heavy at the top. The running back class we just talked about. The tight end group, yeah, we got Kenyon Sadiq, and you can feel how you feel about him, but even him, it's like, that's the Evan Ingram tree, which, as we know, historically is not great for projection to the NFL. It's worked for a couple of guys, but it's not a great, unless you're prolific like a Bowers, like it's not the easiest connector to success. So spending a first-round pick on him isn't the greatest idea, and he's the same size as Stowers and Jolly from NC State and things. But the receiver class has to carry the boat this year in the first round for sure, and then we need a couple of more guys to kind of stick their head up and kind of get us, the back end of the first, early second to kind of bring us, I'm really worried, Theo. We're going to talk about, a couple of rounds of drafts here today, but I'm really worried about the overall depth and the people that didn't listen for the last 2 years and say, like, dude, get rid of your 26 picks, push them to 27. Like, you need to be doing this. Like, it's unlike any other year where you should have been doing this all year. Like, generally we say, wait until you're on the clock, then trade the pick away. Like this year, I've ever more than anything, it's been get rid of that pick. Like as soon as you could have gotten rid of it during the season to make a play, to push it to 27 or to get a player, then that was the move for me. And we're seeing it come to fruition now with, guys that shouldn't be in the first round being in the first round in some mocks.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I mean, I think at the end of the day, landing spots are going to matter for some of these players. Certainly, there's a lot of negativity with this class. Cody, what do you have going on? You're a busy man. What's a week in the life look like, podcast-wise? What else are you cranking out, getting ready for this combine?
Oh man, it's day in the life is really just a lot of film right now. Not only with Roster Watch, where I'm working on the top 100 board that's going to come out this week before the NFL Combine. My positional rankings will come out. I just dropped my latest 2-round mock draft over at rosterwatch.com, but also simultaneously building out national rankings for high school, for the 2027 high school class. So kids that are going to be freshmen in college next year. So these guys are seniors in high school today. Those guys, I'm working on those guys as well for Orange Blood. So that's the other place that I'm working right now. Do a show over there with Alex as well every single night. So just a lot of tape, a lot of evaluations, a lot of research, and a lot of podcasting. That's about where it's at. So you can find everything over at Cody Carpentier on the Twitters.
Texas Longhorns, are they the national title winners this year, Cody, on the record?
My 3 teams, Notre Dame, Texas, and Oregon for 2026. That's kind of the eyeballs I got right now. I think Texas did enough. There's a little bit of question mark on the offensive line. I love where Notre Dame is at. I really like what Oregon was able to bring back. Of course, Dante Moore. But those are the 3 teams. I'm not going to go out on the stoop and say Texas is going to win it all. I'm not a homer. I cover the team. I'm not a Texas fan. I just cover the team and evaluate. So I'm not going to go step on that. If you're going to say, hey, pick a team.
There we go. There you go. You heard it here first. Let's get this one started. I'm taking the 101, and I usually give the 101 to guess. But this year, in all formats, it's Jeremiyah Love. I think that the draft capital is going to be excellent. I think ultimately we're going to see Jeremiyah Love selected inside of the top 10. And Cody, oftentimes we'll get into it because I got the fantasy brain on. I oftentimes will try to push skill position players up, and you're always kind of walking me back. But Jeremiyah Love, the writing's on the wall. I think the draft capital is going to be similar to an Ashton Genty, to a Bijan Robinson, and potentially higher than those guys. There could be a chance that a shock pick at 3, a shock pick at 4, a shock pick at 5 are all in the wheelhouse because he might be the most skilled offensive player in this entire draft class. The home run hitting ability, the 3-down skill set. There's not a lot to dislike about the profile. Jeremiyah Love is a elite asset for dynasty managers, and any criticism you have in this class, we still have Jeremiyah Love, a potential 101 in redraft down the line, carrying this draft class at the very top. So Jeremiyah Love, super easy pick for me at the 1 spot.
Obviously, I think it's a great pick. He's going to end up being a top 20 pick, top 15 pick, and we anticipate the landing spot's going to be what it is. So I don't really have a lot to add. I love Jeremiyah Love. I think he's the clear-cut singular player in Tier 1 this year in Superflex drafts, even ahead of the quarterback.
Now, how about the 102 here for you, Cody? Interesting selection. Again, this is Superflex, and we've got a PPR tight end premium. Quarterback, wide receiver. A lot of decisions to be made here.
Yeah, and so I'm very tight. I don't know how you feel about these receivers. If you've got any split on any of them or not, we can talk about that as the picks come out. But I'm not split on any of them right now. The combine goes a long way. Like I said, we grade at the combine. We grade every single route they run. We've done it for the last 3 years, and we're going to do it again. And I can't wait to see. I think Tate's probably going to come away as my number 1. Is where I lean right now. But because he's in that bunch, I'm going to go quarterback here and take Fernando Mendoza because he, like Jeremiyah Love, is the kind of lone wolf at the top right now at the position. So I'm going to go take Fernando Mendoza. He'll be the number 101 pick. He'll have Bowers. He'll have Genty. I think they go through and they draft offensive. They got like 8 or 9 picks this year. I just went through and did a 7-round draft over on the Draft Rankings YouTube channel for the Raiders, and they can come away with a very good crop of offensive linemen to protect Fernando Mendoza, allow him to get the football out to Bowers and Genty and whoever else they sign in for agency to play wide receiver. I really like where the Raiders could be heading with Kubiak now as the coach, so I'm going to go Fernando Mendoza 102 here in Super.
Yeah, and I think when we look at Vegas, I completely agree with you that I think they're going to address wide receiver in the draft, maybe with that 2nd-round pick. They also could hit the offensive line heavy. but they also have a great deal of cap space. And I think that's going to be the plan, where after the early portion of free agency, which is also right around the corner, I think a lot of answers will be there for what is Vegas going to look like on the offensive line. Wouldn't be surprised if they signed 2 free agent offensive linemen looking to protect this asset. Cody, let me ask you this. The Klint Kubiak hire, what does that do for you when it comes to Fernando Mendoza? Certainly, most people in the fantasy space love Kubiak, the hire there, but does it really kind of elevate and solidify Mendoza for you at a 102 spot?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think Mendoza is elite, but I think he can carry the water. And I think we saw that, when Kubiak was in Minnesota back when Cousins was there. Kubiak was in San Francisco when Purdy was a rookie. Like, he's been in Seattle this year. Like, he can succeed, or he's been a part of teams that have succeeded with guys like Mendoza. Not to say they're just white quarterbacks, because they all literally are, but guys that can carry the water, and they aren't entirely elevators, but they can help you win football games, and they can throw for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. And I think Mendoza's a guy that can coherently do that, especially with talent around him. So I think Kubiak does, to me, just solidifies what he can be, and really, I think, raises the floor.
Yeah, I can't blame you. And also, if from a game theory perspective, Mendoza is the only player that I think we would project to be a week 1 starter out of this entire draft class. And so if you need a quarterback, it doesn't get, you could do a lot worse than a Klint Kubiak quarterback with Brock Bowers, Ashton Genty, and whoever they acquire at the wide receiver position. Mendoza, I think, could ultimately be a top 15 type quarterback. Brett Whitefield a little bit higher on that ceiling, and certainly he's going to need to throw for a lot of touchdown passes with this profile to really succeed in fantasy. But from a super flex perspective, incredibly insulated as a 101 pick. So I don't blame you taking him at the 102. My 102, though, I'm going to try to find ways to draft Carnell Tate. You bring up the Jordyn, not to spoil this, because these guys probably go off the board in the next few picks, but Makai Lemon, Jordyn Tyson, both excellent prospects here. Lemon has a hive for fantasy football. Tyson, awesome player at Arizona State. One thing with Tyson I'll be interested in, Cody, is the physicals. Guy's got a lot of former injuries there. And then with Lemon, a little bit smaller here. And does the draft capital reflect a 102, 103 in a Dynasty rookie mock draft? With Carnell Tate, I don't have those worries. I don't have those concerns. He's every bit 6'2", 6'3". He's long. He's a great route runner. He can make plays downfield. Doesn't ever seem to drop the ball. And the guy is going to get drafted somewhere in that sweet spot. I think you're talking about the 104. He's in play for Tennessee, which would be an ideal landing spot because he'd be immediately the focal point of an offense with Brian Dable calling the shots. And I think his floor is probably Kansas City at 9. I think he probably goes in that Cleveland, Washington, New York Giants, and then again, KC cleaning him up. I think he's going to test well, looks great on film. I think Carnell Tate's a very clean prospect, and I think the draft capital is going to reflect it. So I'm taking him off the board here at the 103. Your OTC at the 104, but your quick thoughts on Carnell Tate.
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine if he fell to the Chiefs? I know everyone kind of makes fun of the Chiefs for who they got and when they drafted them and how they haven't succeeded and stuff, and people have their opinions about Xavier Worthy, but man, Carnell Tate falling to the Chiefs would be – it's not going to happen, like you said. It's pretty – it's the other thing that's nice about his just Tate's profile period is the fact that you kind of can ink it in that he's going to be a top 10 pick, which we haven't always been able to say. It's, only a handful of guys like Neighbors and Chase and London and stuff like this, and it's like that's been the last decade. I don't know if Tate's quite up to that level for me. I'm going to be very interested to see how fast he runs. Another guy that I'm not worried about how fast he runs, I'm going to take here at the 104, is Mr. Makai Lemon. Blitnikoff, that's what we're going to call him right now, 5'11", 195. He fits the mold of what we love in this new age alpha, whether it's the Amon-Ra's or the Chases or the Jeffersons or the Diggs, or whatever you want to call it. This is what Makai Lemon profiles as. It's easy to helmet scout and just say Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't really want to do that. So I really like Makai Lemon, though. I think he's a guy that could be a target hog at the next level and succeed. So kind of in the same category and conversation. A lot of people are going to talk about Jordyn Tyson. I think Makai Lemon's going to make an argument as well to be your overall wide receiver one. I remember 2 years ago with brain fart. Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors. Like, that was the big conversation. It really wasn't right away, right? And everyone was like, well, Marvin has to be the number one. And we started to have the conversation. I remember, like, around this time, like a week and a half before the combine, and we go in there and Neighbors runs fast, and Rome has a phenomenal showing just overall in routes and in three cone and all the different stuff that he did in interviews. And we walked out saying, we might have 3 number ones here. And I think we're kind of looking at that same situation here where it's like everyone's having Tyson's been the guy for the longest time. And you have Tate, who's coming from Ohio State, and you have Lemon from USC, wins the Blitnikoff. Like, this is a very good crop of 3 dudes here. I don't think you can go wrong in any direction, so I'm going to take Lemon here.
I love it. And you mentioned the prototype that's been hitting for fantasy football. Lemon has that. Names get thrown out there, sort of pick your poison. The Jackson Smith and Jigba, how he's used. Puka Nacua, how he's used. So, like Makai Lemon, if he lands cleanly, Cody, I think that the fantasy football hive is going to be just buzzing when it comes to Makai Lemon. And he's also got insulation where if he starts to fall a little bit, you've got these teams sort of towards the back end of the first round that could maybe move up, a Buffalo, a San Francisco, where we get really, really excited about those landing spots too. So I love Makai Lemon. I think he's awesome. But the 105 here with those 2 wide receivers off the board, I'm going to take Jordyn Tyson. And again, Tyson has had multiple injuries, but none of them sort of overlap with one another. So I think it'll be clean when it comes to the NFL and how they evaluate him. I think he's going to be a top 15 pick when it comes down to it. He's got the body control. He's a big-time athlete. You're talking about a guy whose brother is in the NBA and is a good NBA player at that. So, like, it's a really, really athletic prospect. Fantastic body control. He's got the ability to win on contested catches. I think you can move him around, and I think his route running is really, really good. I think Jordyn Tyson, a very, very clean prospect. And to me, this is sort of an end of a tier. The top 5 in our current Superflex rookie rankings kind of reflects that, where I think the big decision is actually going to be you here at the 106. Tyson, I think, clearly deserves to be inside this 105. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, I do. The thing is, we've seen a lot lately, especially Tyson getting suppressed, it feels like, from like all the big mocks and stuff. It's like, oh, look, Tyson fell to the Cowboys. You're like, hold up, wait, he fell to the Cowboys? Like, how does he fall to, how does he fall that far? But in reality, when you look at the profile, there's more ticks off than there are ticks on the profile for Tyson, because of the injuries, because of the inconsistencies, because of the availability, and he transferred. And you look at Tate and Lemon, they're just like very cut, dry, to the point what these guys can be. And of course, attaching their school, it only helps the analysis process where you're like, well, we've seen guys come from this school and this program and this way and succeed, da-da-da-da-da. So those guys have been climbing, and I just think retrospectively they've been pushing Tyson down. But like I said, I think Tyson belongs to stay in this conversation. It's kind of that flat circle thing where it started with Tyson number 1, but as we get all the way back around, he's still going to stay in this top 3 conversation. It just really depends on if he goes 8 or 20. That's kind of where I'm at with that. You talked about a tier break, and I think we're at it. And I think the next 10 days is going to be very big for Denzel Boston. I'm not sold that he's going to run some, firecracker 4.42 or something at 6'4", 210 pounds. But I'm sold on Denzel Boston, the prospect. I think he's very underrated coming from the West Coast. Not a lot of people. This is the boring thing. Everyone says nobody watches the West Coast. Nobody watches the Pac-12. Well, he's in the Big Ten now. People still really don't watch Washington unless they're playing Oregon or Ohio State. I think he's got good acceleration, very fluid route runner. I like Denzel Boston, and this is what I'm talking about. Generally, I don't think Denzel Boston would be the pick here at 106 in most drafts. But we don't have a running back, for me, in sight at the current stage. I'm not taking Kenyon Sadiq. You know my history of the tight ends. I'm not taking tight ends inside the top 8 picks. I just won't do it. I don't think that there's value in that. And there's no quarterback. So I'm going wide receiver. The next wide receiver to me is Denzel Boston from Washington.
Yeah, and Brett Whitefield has said, like, Brett Whitefield is not doing a comp, but he's saying that there's some playing style traits where CeeDee Lamb has names he's mentioned, Puka Nacua, certain things he's mentioned, not to get the fantasy people hype, but Denzel Boston has a lot to like about his profile. And Cody, like, this is a safe pick at this moment because Denzel Boston, I think, is also a player that I would be shocked if he falls out of round 1. I think he's going to be selected somewhere ultimately in that 18 through 25 range. And there's a couple of landing spots there where he could end up being a team's wide receiver 1. You talk about Pittsburgh Steelers need a wide receiver there. Talk about the Buffalo Bills. And there's a couple of teams that could trade up to get some Denzel Boston. So I like that one. I actually took him the last time I did a Dynasty rookie draft. 107 time. And Cody, 107 in a tight end premium here. You mentioned Kenyon Sadiq, and then there's a wide receiver I really, really like. But just for the point of this, I think I would take Kenyon Sadiq here. Because, again, tight end premium, I'm going to get a tight end going in the first round. Big-time athlete with Kenyon Sadiq. And in that 6'3", 245-pound range, you mentioned Evan Engram, but that's also sort of in the wheelhouse size-wise that we've seen with guys like Sam Laporta, guys like Trey McBride, certainly Harold Fannin this year. Going to throw Brock Bowers, similarly built. So we've seen that sort of size hit. I want to go with Kenyon Sadiq here, but just so we can hear you talk, I have to go OTC, see if you take him. I'm going to take KC Concepcion here at the 107, which I think for me, both of those guys would be back-to-back. I think KC Concepcion is awesome. I have him actually ahead of Denzel Boston. I think he's going to be like a better Zay Flowers type at the NFL level. If he lands well, I think he could just be a dynamite fantasy football asset. And then in terms of draft capital, I see a bunch of mock drafts where KC's going towards the end of the first round. I think he can crack that top 20. I think it could end up being like last year where Egbuka kept getting mocked somewhere in like the 25 through 30 range, and then all of a sudden somebody just takes Egbuka inside the top 20. I think we'll see that with KC Concepcion. We also have, if we're correct on this wide receiver class, there could be a gravitational pull where you get Tate off the board at the 4, maybe Tyson goes in that 6 through 8 range, 6 through 9 range. Makai Lemon goes somewhere around pick 13. Maybe the Rams take him off the board. Then you're going to see Boston and KC Concepcion, and all of a sudden, we have 5 wide receivers selected inside the top 20 picks. If it's as wide open a draft class, then maybe the NFL leans into a strong top of the wide receiver room, and we see that sort of scenario. So I feel good about KC Concepcion here at the 107. Your OTC here at the 108.
I think that's entirely possible, and I think it's likely. And I think Concepcion is the definition of kind of what I brought up earlier in guys that generally wouldn't be first-round picks. I don't think in our fantasy leagues, but it is what it is. It's 2026. This is the world we live in. I hate that you just did that to me because you know that Sadiq was like, cool. Like literally, I'm reading through my rankings. Like we put in our rookie draft, 1 QB, super flex, and then our tight end premium rankings, and this is boom, boom, boom. I'm just counting down the list, and all of a sudden I go, all right, next up, KC can sit. And then you say, okie doke. So here's the deal. I'm not going Kenyon Sadiq because I'm taking the next running back. And the next running back, I think at this current stage that gets the best draft capital is going to be 5'9", 228 pounds, Jonah Coleman. He's going to have 99th percentile BMI. He's carried the thing is he's carried the rock, and I think coming into the year I was most open to him being like the one guy that could compete. Matty Hume's going to love this because he thinks I hate Jonah Coleman, but he's the one guy that I thought could compete with Love potentially for the number 1 spot. he had a great running back playing with him, Adam Muhammad at Washington this last year. Kind of suppressed his work a little bit. His yards per carry dropped from 6.8 to 5.5 to 4.9 this past year. Wasn't quite the same player, but again, 3 consecutive seasons over 1,100 yards from scrimmage, multiple seasons with 23, 24, 25, and 31 receptions on the season. I like Jonah Coleman. I think he's going to get the next best draft capital. Maybe Jadarian Price gets to him, but I think Jonah Coleman's going to get some high draft capital. And at this running backs situation we're dealing with, I like Jonah Coleman.
I ultimately think Coleman and Jadarian Price will both be top 50 selections. Coleman, you bring up the body type, like 225, 230, but he's like 5'8 and a half, 5'9", very, very thick back, but he can also catch the football, Cody. So I think he's not necessarily going to be we're not talking about a guy who's going to be a threat to lead running backs in receptions, but I think Jonah Coleman could end up being a 50-catch guy for multiple seasons of his NFL career, insulating his fantasy football production. Draft capital is going to be there. And that's one thing where I used to be a co-host over at Sonic Truth with Matt Kelly. You are now, but that's one thing that you've consistently talked about during your time at Player Profiler. You now talk about it at Roster Watch, but talk about BMI for running backs, because a lot of people don't always use that term, but you're consistently using it.
I think it's important just for longevity purposes. We've always talked about the Trey Mason-Dixon line, which is about 205, 204, and you look at when these guys weigh in, you're like, all right, where's he going to be? There's some guys you're worried about, right? And, for instance, there's one that I'm super worried about this year that a lot of people have clamored to, and that's Emmett Johnson from Nebraska. And you look at that guy, that 297 touches last year in Nebraska. Probably talk about him later in this draft, but a guy like that, when you instantly go, this is RB2, this guy has RB2 upside, I go, yeah, but he might be 194. And when you look at a guy that's 194 pounds versus a guy that even is 204 pounds or 208 pounds, McCaffrey has always been an outlier. Eckler has always been an outlier. When you look at longevity in the NFL for a position that generally is about 2.5 to 3.5 years of longevity, particularly in the prime, and you prime out at 25.5, that just having that much more weight on your body to go through the 18 weeks that you go through in the NFL it goes a long way. It doesn't sound like a lot, but having that 10 extra pounds is massive for you in the process. So I think that's something that people really need to attach themselves to, is understanding that you can't expect a guy like Emmett Johnson from Nebraska, who might weigh 194 pounds at the combine next week, and 297 touches in college is not 297 touches in the NFL, and it's going to treat you much differently. So, you have to weigh that when you're having conversations about him, and then having a conversation about a guy like Jeremiyah Love, who's 210 or 211 or 212, whatever he's going to be. And then you have a conversation about a guy like Jonah Coleman, who's 228, or Nick Singleton, who's 222. It's a whole different understanding of, all right, this guy catches passes. This guy can go between the tackles. This guy maybe a satellite plus. I mean, this guy's not – Emmett Johnson, a guy's at 194 pounds. You never see these guys in between the tackles, in between the guards on a down-to-down basis. And if you do, well – sometimes injuries are what's
follows. Yeah, it definitely a very, very interesting take there. You make my pick super easy, though. I'm going Kenyon Sadiq. Kenyon Sadiq is not even 21 years old yet. I believe he'll be 21, turning 21 right around the NFL draft. So much room to run for him as a prospect, but I think we get a locked-in first-round pick. I think that the production, there's some people who analytically are kind of picking his profile apart, but I do think athleticism is there. The NFL is going to love him. I think the draft capital could be very, very strong. We started to see some mock drafts where he starts falling into the mid-20s, but then we're also still seeing him mocked as high as 9 to KC, 11 to Miami. I think he's got a kind of a wide range of where he'll end up, but I do think he's a lock first-round pick, and I'm getting him at the 109 here in a 1.5 premium. So if it's like a FFPC-type format, I feel like Kenyon Sadiq ultimately will be going higher than this because the draft capital is sort of going to force that issue. You might get burned if you're expecting him to give you Tyler Warren right out the gate. You're expecting any sort of Brock Bowers-ish. That's the trend. Probably ends this year for a rookie tight end finishing as a top 5 scorer. But Sadiq will have some spike weeks due to his athleticism. And I think heading into year 2, I think he's going to be a really, really, really strong asset for us in fantasy football. I will immediately have him as a tight end 1 in the Dynasty rankings as soon as his name is called. So top 12-ish right out the gate for him. Sadiq off the board here at the 109. You're back OTC here, Cody. 110 time.
Interesting. I think you're probably right there in the top 12 overall conversation. Question. So my last mock, I put him quite a bit lower than many people are. I kind of was looking at more like a floor situation. Sometimes you go through these mock exercises, especially early, and you're like, all right, what happens if this? What happens if that? And you kind of work yourself, and you go, oh, look who's available at 27 to the San Francisco 49ers.
Kenyon
Sadiq.
I had that one when I mocked with Alex Dunlap and Brett. He just naturally fell, and we took him there. But Cody, like the late ones are the fun ones. Ends up in San Francisco as the Kittle eventual replacement, and you get the bonus that Kittle's going to be out for 10 games or so this coming year. So Sadiq in the Shanahan offense, how about he falls even a couple picks later to Denver at 30, to New England at 31? Then you're really, really talking because, those sort of offenses he could do great. So there's a bunch of landing spots where that might actually be better for him as a fantasy asset. You'd lack the insulation of him being like a top 15 tight end, which you constantly remind me of this every year, Cody. There's been few of these guys. So Bowers, Warren, and Loveland have helped created an atmosphere where it's a copycat league, and I think it's more likely that Kenyon Sadiq would be in the top 15. Yeah. But Cody, when it comes down to prospects, like if we're comparing where he was versus Bowers, where he was versus Warren and Loveland, he's behind those guys, honestly and realistically, but those draft classes are different than this one. So that's where we're at.
So right after Sadiq is to me, it's tough. I think there's a lot of running back conversation that could be had here. I like one receiver more than the rest, but I think I'm going to go quarterback. And the quarterback I'm going to go with is Ty Simpson. And the conversation I'll have here, Ty Simpson from Alabama, came out early, shouldn't have. I think he should have went back to Alabama, but he's had a couple of quarterbacks behind him, and Mack and Russell pushing him, and so this was his decision. He had offers to go make millions and millions at Miami and other schools. He comes out because, and his dad says he was guaranteed basically to be a first-round pick. Not guaranteed, but they heard from some GMs that he was a first-rounder on all of their boards is how it was phrased. I am praying that Ty Simpson goes to the Los Angeles Rams. They have 2 picks in the first round, and Alex hates this theory, but my theory is the Rams are playing chess while everyone else is playing checkers, and checkers is still a great game because you're still getting a quarterback in 27, assuming Dante Moore and Arch and Sayin and Lagway and Sellers. You want me to keep going? Assuming those guys, fulfill their destiny in 2026. But the move is, you got this pick that was from the Pierce trade last year from Atlanta at 13. You could take 13 if you think you need to move up, which I'm sort of worried, Theo. The Jets might do the thing. I think the Simpson thing is going to slowly get up, and you're going to go, well, we didn't get Tua. We didn't get Kyler. Maybe we should just draft Simpson at 2. Because who's going to the season with Justin Fields as their quarterback again? Not me. So I am praying it's the Rams. I am praying the Rams move up. The Rams get a Ty Simpson. If that happens, I think I probably draft him a couple of spots higher than I am right now. But I'm going to take Ty Simpson, the quarterback from Alabama, with the understanding that in my head, he hopefully goes to the Rams and sits for a year behind Stafford and then takes over the kingdom.
I think you nailed it. I think LA, and you put him in the Jordyn Love trajectory where he sits behind a older veteran. Brett Whitefield's brought this up as well, where Brett I would completely agree with you. I've been on this train. Brett sort of agrees with it too. And also with the Rams, Matt Stafford just sits out the preseason. So Simpson can run the first team offense in the preseason. And then eventually you get Simpson to take over when Stafford retires. Maybe that's after 1 year. Maybe that's 2 years. But the caveat you get is Simpson might be an auto QB1 in a McVay offense. So I would much prefer that. And this kind of like sacrilege because the idea that he's a Jet, or for that matter, a Pittsburgh Steeler, and one of those two teams, he has a chance to start more quickly, but what is that worth? And when you look at the lack of college starts for Simpson, that's been a red flag for a lot of these quarterbacks that have come out, been drafted highly and failed. The Lances, the Anthony Richardson types, where they come in, they struggle at the NFL level, and you can say, okay, well, guys like Jaden Daniels had 45 starts in college, but you had 15 starts. So naturally, the learning curve is larger for them. Simpson is 23, but he only started, 15 games at Alabama, 16 games. So I think he needs that. So I agree with you. He lands in LA. I'm going to be very high on that one, even in a redshirt capacity. It changes the way that you have a dynasty roster. I mean, ideally, you get yourself some Simpson, and then you trade for old man Stafford, and you just roll with the Rams quarterback in your QB2 spot, and you're printing. So I love that one. I like that selection, especially the way you frame it. I'm going to attempt to rescue another running back in this draft class here at the 111. I'm going with Jadarian Price, and I think Jadarian Price is really good. You mentioned guys who can lead a committee. There's a chance that, like, when you talk about Love, you talk about Coleman, those guys project as maybe a higher volume guy. With Price, he's been a backup at Notre Dame, so just how much volume can he take on? I do think there's going to be some NFL teams that look at it and say he has less tread on the tires because he played behind a Love, but athletically, he's got that same sort of big-time athleticism, the big-time burst, and I think Jadarian Price, despite the fact that he didn't catch passes at the college level, I think he'll develop into a guy that can catch balls at the NFL level. So I think Jadarian Price, the combine's actually going to be beneficial to him. You mentioned the second round. I think he also goes inside of the second round. There's a couple of fun landing spots for Jadarian Price. 49, Minnesota Vikings. I think that's an interesting one. Houston Texans in that round 2. I think he's right there. New Orleans would be an interesting one. So I'm going to take Jadarian Price here at the 111 and help to push up another running back. You were OTC at the 112, unless you have any thoughts on Price.
The problem with the Vikings at 49 and stuff, I think he's going to make an argument to go earlier than this. There was murmurs during the year that, hey, this guy might sneak in around 1. I'm like, hold your phone, dog. I don't know. I don't think the athleticism is going to be that great. I don't think he's going to run some 4.39 and surprise us like maybe a Breece Hall did. But I looked at the Cardinals at 34, and I was like, man, could you imagine he goes like the second pick off in the second round, and they got James Conner and Trey Benson, and we love Trey Benson, but man, it just hasn't worked out. And a guy like a Jadarian Price that he's got 16% of his team's production this year with Jeremiyah Love in that backfield. Other guys in this class that are at or below that: Jam Miller 13%, Roman Hemby 16% from Indiana, Rasul Faison South Carolina 14%, Le'Veon Moss 8% at A&M. Like, in a split backfield with the king of the class, he's still putting up team production shares at or above some other dudes that are just middle of the pack in this class. So he's a stud, man. He's worth a first-round pick in this class for sure. At the turn, though, I'm going to go running back as well. This guy broke his foot, sadly, in the third day of the Senior Bowl. He's a part of the itty-bitty calf committee, and he's a stud, though. Squat 660 at Penn State, set all the records. He was going to run super fast. He's a guy that's got that dynamism. You see him in the open field, and, I love these maniacal comps. We usually come up with, you're looking at – this is not for him, but you look at these guys, and you're like, oh, that's a Sony Michel or a Malik Davis, a Ronnie Hillman. You get these nice, classic, middle-of-the-road running back comps. But so we brought up earlier with Mike Washington, Clinton Portis. The comp for Nick Singleton that I saw at the Senior Bowl was Willis McGahee. And I think that when I saw it at the Senior Bowl, I was like, oh, I might have to put the calf thing off to the side a little bit. But then he had the injury. I'm a little worried. I think Singleton without a broken foot probably vaults himself closer to that wide receiver grouping, maybe into that wide receiver grouping with a dynamite combine, which is what I expected from him. So I think we're getting a little bit of value here on Nick Singleton.
Yeah, I think that there's going to be I think there's a lot of prospect fatigue in the dynasty community with Nick Singleton. But yes. Cody, I mean, you go through the list of towards the very top in rushing yards, towards the very top in rushing touchdowns in Penn State history, along with Kaytron Allen, and Nick Singleton can catch the ball. He's a very good receiver out of the backfield. And then you mentioned the size-speed combination. This guy's been on the freaks list for multiple seasons. NFL teams know how athletic Nick Singleton is. And there's a lot of NFL teams that probably wanted to draft him last year. Singleton would have been – it's funny, if Singleton would have just come out last year, the dynasty community would have liked him more than him going back to Penn State. So for better or for worse, that Penn State team, those guys going back to school, I didn't really help them that much. well, I'm sure we're going to mention Kaytron Allen these next few picks. 13 overall here. I think we're back into the wide receiver selection, and I'm going to go with Elijah Sarratt, who's an absolute dog. I know that there's Omar Cooper is a guy that we probably mentioned in these next 10 picks too, right out of Indiana as well. But Elijah Sarratt, Cody, goes from St. Francis to James Madison to Indiana to winning the national title. Ends up having production everywhere. He's got good size. He's like 6'2", 215. I think he's going to go somewhere in that wheelhouse of where Vegas picks in round 2, where Tennessee picks in round 2, like somewhere in that top 40 range. I've seen like a wider range of projections for him, but I think ultimately he's a guy that's going to be a very good wide receiver 2 on a number of NFL offenses with potential to be an opportunistic wide receiver 1 for somebody for a few years. Elijah Sarratt off the board here at 13.
I haven't done my deep work on Sarratt, so I'm going to keep my opinions to myself. I don't have Sarratt that high, but I know our guy Matty Kiwoom does, and I think he had a great playoff of what I watched from Sarratt, but I haven't done the deep work on him quite yet. That's on my to-do list in the next 48 hours before the Combine. 202 here, though. I am going to go receiver. You brought receiver up. I started to quake in my pants a little bit, quake in my boots, and I thought you were going to go Germie Bernard. Germie Bernard, I think, is one of the most underrated receivers in this class, and for one simple reason, one simple thing can I attach y'all's minds to with Germie Bernard is just consistency. 6'1", 204 pounds, initially at Washington, transfers to Alabama with Kalen DeBoer. Germie Bernard isn't going to be your pop, your flash, and your sizzle, but Germie Bernard is going to be exactly what we all told you Chris Olave would be, which is just a guaranteed first down getter, can stretch the field a little bit, but not elite. He's just going to do everything right and everything good and everything adequate. He's going to play 10 years in the NFL, and he's going to have a 1,000-yard season 4 or 5 times. Hopefully not get as concussed as Chris Olave, but he's just going to give you exactly what you need here in the second round, which is a guaranteed plug-and-play starter eventually in fantasy football.
Yeah, I think it's a great pick. I could have taken him one pick ahead as well. Do you see any of the Debo stuff with Bernard? He's thick, has the ability to do some things with the ball in his hand. How do you like yak at the next level? You think his ability to accumulate yards with yards after the catch as well, Cody?
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. I mean, probably not my first choice for a comp. Probably closer to like a Bobby Woods type of deal, but I can see it a little bit. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and Germie Bernard, there's been a couple people projecting him inside of round 1, so there could be a course correction after the NFL draft. We'll keep an eye on that. We go wide receiver here to start out the second round. I'm going to go over to the running back spot, and I'm going to go Kaytron Allen out of Penn State. We mentioned Nick Singleton. I think Kaytron Allen ultimately will be selected inside of round 3. I think both those guys will end up being day 2 selections. Kaytron Allen, I'll throw out David Montgomery. I think he could have a David Montgomery-like path at the NFL level. The all-time leading rusher at Penn State. And Kaytron Allen sort of flipped the market on Nick Singleton for a lot of people this year, Cody. More productive than Singleton this year at Penn State. And when the coaching change happened, they really leaned into Kaytron Allen. Kaytron Allen, I believe he scored a touchdown in every single game this year. Correct me on that one, Cody. But he was very consistent as a touchdown scorer, and this is a player that's been contributing at Penn State for all 4 years. So Kaytron Allen, I think NFL teams are going to really like him. I think next year he's going to ultimately end up being a 1B in a strong like running back duo. I think he could end up being a high-end, like a high-end handcuff type. But if he lands well, you could see it now where he leads a backfield for 5-6 games of the year and makes a fantasy football impact. I think teams are going to like Kaytron Allen, taking him off the board here. And I know you like Kaytron Allen too, so I think I sniped you on that one, maybe.
I like Kaytron Allen a lot. He was next in line for me right there. You talked about it. I mean, every game but one. Every game but the Indiana game he scored.
Okay, I missed it. There you go.
But, hey, I mean, that's a good stat. Not quite as good as your Omari Hampton stat from last year.
Oh, the Omari Hampton, that was an all-timer. That was to be continued here, Cody. Keep us going here. I'll try to come up with some hot stats. I'll have a good one that you'll like before the end of draft season. Don't have a banger yet, but Give me a good pick here at 16 that'll get the people going.
That's going to be your one task for when I have you in the Roster Watch show here soon. I want one stat from you. It's going to be the closer. What's your stat for draft season? All right.
That's it.
My pick here is going to be Emmett Johnson. I talked about my worry with his size, but man, when I'm looking at this class right now, overall, where it stands, no, I'm not. Why would I do that? I'm not doing that. Give me Mike Washington from Arkansas. I believe in Mike Washington from Arkansas. I believe in the 228-pound frame. I believe in BMI. I believe in my Clinton Portis comp, and I believe I've taken an aggressive stance on him. And I didn't take him where I have him ranked. Like I said, I'm leaning to have him as my running back 2 overall, but you don't have to take him there. That's the art of this whole thing we do called drafting. We're drafting against 11 other people most of the time. And so you don't have to take Mike Washington in the first round. You can sit here and get him in the early part of the second. You can probably get him even later than this in a lot of drafts too. So I'm going to take Mike Washington Jr., who we've talked about already, from Arkansas.
Yeah, I love the pick. And Johnson could have made sense as well, and I'm sure his name's going to come up over the next few picks, but Washington, like 230, he's big. Like a lot of the things we like about Kaytron Allen also apply to Washington, and I think ultimately we've sort of nailed the backs that could go on day 2. Ultimately, I think Emmett Johnson probably is a 4th-round pick. These other guys going inside of day 2, whether people care about that as much, I think a lot of the community doesn't. But I still like seeing NFL teams invest day 2 draft capital when it comes to the running back position, even with some of these 4th-rounders hitting year after year. I'm here at the OTC at the 17th overall pick. So we're at the 5th pick inside of round 2, and we are in a tight end premium draft. I'm going to go with Eli Stowers of Vanderbilt. You talk about a player that's going to be sub 240, so we're talking about like a Rondé Gadsden type size. But Stowers is an elite athlete. You can play him inside the slot. If he lands correctly, Cody, I think he could be a really, really strong fantasy football asset. And a lot of the question marks with Sadiq don't apply to Stowers, who was a big-time producer at the SEC level. The story for him is interesting, too. Texas A&M as a quarterback transfers to Vanderbilt as a tight end. Really interesting prospect. And I think that there's a chance that somebody might fall in love at the end of round 1. And I think those teams we talk about, like New England, Denver, somebody might pull the trigger on Stowers. And I think then you've got a real interesting conversation. It's a strong tight end class, but I think Stowers right now is my tight end 2. So I'm taking him off the board here.
Very interesting. You missed one part of that Stowers story, which I think is fascinating. Is he was a quarterback at A&M, but then transfers to New Mexico State first with Pavia, and Pavia plays quarterback. He switches to tight end with Pavia, has his season, transfers to Vandy with Pavia, and then they just grow from there. It's a very fascinating story and a very fascinating athlete. I comped him to Ricky Seals-Jones. He's interesting to me. He's not my favorite in the class. I have a couple of – hopefully we talk about my favorite tight end in the class. We'll see if we get to him. But I do like what Stowers brings. Like you said, though, I'm just worried about the 235-pound frame that he brings as well.
Yeah, right. You know who else was? New Mexico State had Mike Washington as well. Who is recruiting all these guys to New Mexico State years ago? And
didn't they have what was the other running back? Was that last year? I think it was with Mike.
One of these guys was
McGowan.
Yeah, McGowan was there from Kentucky.
So they weren't all there at the same time. It was Pavia, Stowers, and the next year was McGowan and Washington. So hey, draft. Well, maybe Pavia doesn't get drafted, but
Las Cruces, New Mexico, the cradle of the NFL right now with this draft class. Keep us going here, Cody. Who you got?
What pick are we at here? 205, 206.
We are at the 206. We're 18 overall.
206. All right. So for me, in the way I have the rankings drilled down right now, I think I'm going to go. I think I would go. I'm not going to do this, but I think I would go Nussmeier if I know things are going to unfold how I think they might at the combine from a throwing perspective. But I'm worried about the off field. I'm worried about the injuries. I'm not completely sold on that. I need to see more. I need to hear more. So for those reasons, I'm going to go with one of the Yak Kings. And you know we love Yak, especially in fantasy football, especially in the NFL, period. One of the Yak Kings of the class, and he goes by the name of Zachariah Branch There's only a couple of players that have this style of which he can play with. He's very dynamic, creates a lot after the catch, creates a lot punt return, kick return. There's only a couple names I put in this book. You open it up on the first page, the definition of the rubber knee ligaments is Tyreek Hill. Guys that have followed suit, we saw this year Malachi Tony from Miami, and then another guy right here in Zachariah Branch, who a little more slight than those two, but Zachariah Branch brings a pop, and he brings some dynamism. And I getting him here in the latter half of the second round is a great spot for me. So Zachariah Branch, who has pound for pound, maybe the most talent at the position, but his size isn't exactly adequate.
So Branch is small, but he's going to absolutely fly at the combine. Any guess as to what he clocks that 40 in, Cody?
Let's see, what did we get for? I don't think I did his write up. I think Trashman might have did his write up. I think I had him predicted for 4.2, 4.34, 4.34 maybe.
Yeah, so he's gonna fly. He has to though at that size.
Yeah.
So Branch, I think there's a kind of a disconnect. A lot of the dynasty community dislikes Zachariah Branch, but I think there's going to have to be a course correction, Cody. You see this every year where this time of year maybe somebody's not on somebody and then the draft capital sort of forces the issue. I think that could be the case with Branch. I took him last time with Brett Whitefield and Jagger May, and those guys were hating on my Branch pick, but Cody Carpentier rescuing it right here. But you say you like guys with the yak ability. I'll go with a guy that has a lot better size here and also, I think, really strong yak ability at the next level, and that's Omar Cooper of Indiana. I took Sarratt. I'm going to take Cooper. I think Cooper is really, really fun with the ball in his hands. And you talk about fantasy football, there's a hive right now when it comes to Cooper. He was at Indiana for his entire career. This wasn't a player that was one of these transfers into Indiana. Very interesting there, but he was fantastic for the Hoosiers this year. Had probably the catch of the year this year against Penn State. And I think he's ultimately a very good value. I think he'll end up being a second-round pick in the NFL draft along with Sarratt. Will be interesting to see how teams in the NFL value these guys. But I think ultimately, if I had to bet on it, both go day 2, and I think they both go round 2. So I'm taking Omar Cooper off the board here. You're back OTC here at 20, Cody.
Give you a stat for Omar Cooper.
Please.
22% of his yards this year came against Indiana State. 33% of his touchdowns.
Well, listen.
I'm just playing. I like Omar Cooper.
Yeah, well, there we go. Don't you don't want to mess with Omar Cooper, Indiana State. Don't schedule those Hoosiers anymore. Who you got here at 20 overall, Cody?
I like it. I'm gonna
Emmett
go
Johnson's still on the board. Emmett Johnson's still on the board,
and I might have highlighted him off. I'm passing again. Screw it. Give me Malachi Fields, 6'4", 220 pounds, by way of Notre Dame, by way of the Senior Bowl just a couple of weeks ago. This guy, man, shocked me, surprised me, I guess is maybe the best way to put it. I was not prepared for Malachi Fields to do what he did down there. He wasn't the superstar. He wasn't like a Randy Moss type of thing at this 6'4", 220 pounds, right? He was a possession guy that separated mildly, but downfield he made a majestic catch. Very under his hands came in at 8 3/4, 8.68, very small, sub 2% drop rate in his career at Notre Dame. And when you're listening in live events, this is one of the reasons I love going to these live events. When you hear a wide receiver, or a tight end, or running back catch a football, right, and they suck it in, you can tell when dudes have like 10-inch mitts, right? You talk about your Odell Beckhams, your DeAndre Hopkins, you can hear it pop in. Anthony Miller, famously, 10.5-inch hands, never really hit, but hey, we thought he might. Malachi Fields has 8 and 6/8-inch hands. I shook his hand. That dude's hands are not that small. I think he's going to come to the combine and stretch that thing out. I think he's going to get a clean 9 and some change out of there. Malachi Fields was better at the Senior Bowl than he was at Notre Dame. I'm going to be very interested to see what he runs. I don't think it's going to be great. I think it's going to be somewhere in the 4.58 area. I've comped him to a Michael Pittman type. I've comped him to a Keenan Allen type. I think a big slot situation for a guy like Malachi Fields would go a long way in the NFL. And at this spot, late second round, you're talking about a guy that could potentially become a target hog. I think that goes a long way in PPR.
Yeah, I think Malachi Fields I probably should have considered when I took Sarratt at the beginning of this round, because I think Fields is ultimately, like with Sarratt, I'm saying I think he goes top 40, but Fields,
Yeah.
Cody, the way that the Senior Bowl has gone, these wide receivers that have terrific Senior Bowls, especially ones with size, end up going in that top 45 range. Look at a guy like Jaden Higgins last year, and Fields, you're talking about, he's big, big, big. He's like a tight end out there.
Yeah.
We mentioned Stowers. He's like the same size as Stowers, and he's playing wide receiver. Brett Whitefield has whispered the name T. Higgins when he's talking about Malachi Fields. Are you sort of there? I know we have to go back to the UVA tape, but are you there after the Senior Bowl?
I don't know if I'm quite at Higgins. I've referenced him as sort of this bigger beta alpha, as I think I told you this, but Nate Liss hates that. The beta alpha thing that I call some, because T. Higgins has always been his guy. And I'm like, man, this guy's the definition of the beta alpha. He's not the alpha. He could never stand alone, be by himself, but he's like the majestic number 2. I wonder, the thing I would tell you that only thing I would dislike about the comp is I think Higgins' arms were 34 and an eighth of an inch long. Malachi Fields is 32 and a half. And I can tell you that just off of the hoof on the eyes. I can just tell like T. Higgins is a little bit longer from this perspective going up and getting the football. But otherwise, I like the play style comp quite a bit on him.
Yeah,
he's got small hands too, 9.25 inch hands for T. Higgins. Look at that.
Well, there we go, beta alpha. I'm going to go Emmett Johnson here, Cody. I mean, we left him long enough. I think 21 overall. You talk about getting a guy at the end of the second round. Incredible production this past year at Nebraska. You bring up the weight, not ideal size. I think potentially is in a 1A, 1B type scenario where he's part of a committee, but a very valuable part of a committee, especially early on in his career. For like almost 1,500 rushing yards this past year at Nebraska, and then a very capable receiver out of the backfield. So Emmett Johnson's a player that there's a big hive when it comes to fantasy football community with him. Maybe I'm not quite there with a couple others, but I think second round pick makes a ton of sense, especially getting him in this sort of value towards the tail end of the second. So off the board here at 21, your OTC here at 22.
All right, so what's this put us at, 210?
This puts us at the 210.
So I got 2 picks left. I want to do this strategically. Which one can I get? Which one will I miss on? Or can I get both? I took an injured guy earlier. I'll take an injured guy here. This is one I think if we came back, if we came back 6 months ago, mid-season, Chris Bell from Louisville.
He's top 10 if we do it 6 months ago.
Yeah. I think he's in that top tier conversation, 6'2", 220. The comps that were scattering all over Twitter this year was AJ Brown. I was like, hold your horses, homeboy. Like, he had 900 yards. I get it. He's super dynamic, but I wasn't quite ready for the AJ Brown stuff. But now you got him on an ACL injury that happened, I think it was mid-November. So that puts us 9 months, 10 months, probably getting somewhere around September, October before he gets back to moving. We might miss our whole season next year, but we're talking 210. We're not talking 110. So I like our value here, and we get to hold on to him and potentially get that rookie bump where he kind of gets moving, gets into an offense, gets a good spot, gets a good landing spot, and then all of a sudden you turn on November 10th. Guess who just caught a 74-yard touchdown? Chris Bell. Welcome to the NFL.
Yeah, I love Chris Bell. I mean, I got myself in trouble with Brett. I would text him. I'd be like, look at AJ Brown out here. He'd sort of slow my roll there, but it had a couple of like squint and look like AJ Brown plays on his tape. I mean, you go to the Miami game, there was a bunch of games where he was like 150 plus receiving yards when Louisville was on like a tear mid-season. So, I mean, I get it. I think Chris Bell ultimately will still be a second-round pick, which is a testament to his talent, and a team's willing to sort of sit on him and weigh it out despite the injury. I'm going to go with kind of a flag plant. I mean, I like Justin Jolly. I talked to you about him down in the Senior Bowl, but I'm going to go Michael Trigg from Baylor, a well-traveled player who played at a number of colleges, but then the tape this year at Baylor was nasty. I mean, you're talking about like 6'4", 240. A lot of the stuff that I talked about with Stowers, where this is a deep tight end class. There's a number of these tight ends that could get drafted maybe ahead of Trigg. I think Trigg ultimately will be a third-round selection. Little bit older, Cody, which I don't love. He'll be 24 years old to start the NFL season, but he projects as one of these move tight ends. Could he end up being a Harold Fannin Jr. type at the NFL level? Maybe he could. And when you look at the Baylor tape, he had some exceptional catches this past year for Baylor, like a real potential fantasy asset. Can he stay on the field, and can he be one of these guys that's on the field 65% of the time, or is he one of these guys that could be a move tight end that's like on the field like 48% of the time? I worry about that a little bit with all these move tight ends, but I'll go Michael Trigg here. Might be a little early, but just wanted to make sure we said his name before the end of the pod.
Is this your tight end 3?
I'm kind of all over the place when it comes to tight end 3. I want to put Justin Jolly there. I know there's a couple of other tight ends that are interesting in this draft class, and there's a couple guys who had pretty good weeks when we're talking about the Senior Bowl production. But I think I really want to like Trigg there. Does he go behind a guy like a Max Clare out of Ohio State? Probably. Yeah. I mean, I think Clare is going to get the draft capital, but from a fantasy football perspective, I think Trigg has potential, if he lands well, to be helpful to our fantasy team. So you might not have to use a second-round pick on him, but he's a player that I want exposure to in fantasy to sort of see which way this thing goes.
Who'd you take 2 picks ago?
So the last few picks, it was Omar Cooper for me at 19, Malachi Fields for you at 20, Emmett Johnson at 21, Chris Bell at 22 for you, Michael Trigg, and now you are closing out the second round here, Cody.
All right, that was the one I misclicked. Was Emmett Johnson. The episode will be known for Emmett Johnson's.
Well, there we go.
Let's see. Last pick. I think Sam Roush is another one from Senior Bowl. You should take a. I like Roush quite a bit. 6'5", 260. I'm not going to take him here, but he's in my tight end 3 conversation that we were just talking about. This is I think a pretty terrible spot to be picking, if I'm being quite honest. You can really tell at this stage, for me, that the floor has fallen out of this draft at this current stage. You talk about quarterback, that's where I'm going to go.
Nussmeier?
Just to get Garrett Nussmeier at the 212 in a super flex league where Garrett Nussmeier a year ago, we're talking about this guy as a first-round top 10 pick. A lot of injuries this year. If he passes tests at the combine and everything goes well and he doesn't have some, degenerative this or whatever, and he's all well, I think he's going to pass the interviews with flying colors. I think he'll do well in the passing situations, and he can climb himself right back up into the top 35 and get drafted there in a good situation. And a quarterback in Superflex, as you know, Theo, they're worth $1 billion if they hit. So I'm going to go Nussmeier at the 212.
Yeah, and I think Nussmeier, like that wheelhouse at the beginning of the second round where you've got the Jets, you've got the Browns. There's going to be some outs for him to land right in, similar to like where we saw Tyler Shuck being drafted this past year. So I think the pick is fine, and this is one where let draft capital be your guide. If Nussmeier is selected by the Jets at the very beginning of the second round or the Browns, he's got a pathway to be a starter, you could take him a little higher. If the NFL doesn't take him inside of round 2 and he starts falling into round 3, worry about that a little bit. One guy I just want to get your opinion on, you just saw him at the Senior Bowl, Cole Payton. Where are you at on Cole Payton right now?
Cole Payton's nice.
He's big awesome, lefty. Isn't he?
Big, not a hefty lefty, but a big lefty from North Dakota State. The first snap from at the Senior Bowl that he took was a play action boot out, and the whole defense forgot the dude was left handed. It was kind of funny, but I don't know. Me and Alex said we drove. I don't know. We were in the car together probably 10 hours in the drive to the Senior Bowl and around Florida and stuff, and we talked about the left-handed quarterback and what it does to a team and what needs to be changed and stuff. So I like Payton probably more as like a 4th, 5th round guy. He's getting a lot of helium right now in the NFL draft circles. And in this quarterback class with Beck and with Aller and with Taylor Green and these guys that have been in college for years, and you have a Cole Payton who has less than 300 snaps under his belt, it'll be interesting. 300, I should say, under 300 dropbacks. I think it's like 223 or 227 or something. But I think he's very interesting. I think he's got a ball. He can get to the outside. I like him. I don't love him. I like him. And in Superflex, he's probably going to be like that fourth round, mid fourth round, late fourth round. I'd be willing to take a shot on him.
Yeah,
over guys like Klubnik. Who?
Yeah, 100% agree with you on that one. Yeah, I think Payton's interesting. North Dakota State quarterback, really an interesting player. Starting to see maybe some people projecting him to go inside of round 3. But yeah, Nussmeier, Simpson. There's chances that a landing spot could elevate these guys. There's a chance the bad landing spots could really, really lower them. But this was a lot of fun. Awesome, awesome time, Cody. Kept you way too long. You're always very generous with your takes and your time. Let everybody know once again what you have coming out.
Yeah, I got my top 100 coming out in the next week. My ranking, my positional rankings across quarterback, guard, edge, cornerback, all of it's going to be out at rosterwatch.com, including that top 100 big board. We're doing the draft ranking show 5 days a week. Shout out to Theo for that idea. A year ago, post Senior Bowl, I started doing 10-minute shows every single day on the draft ranking show. Now we're doing that format 3 days a week, and then I got Matty Kuhn on there with me for 45 minutes twice a week. So we're grinding through Roster Watch, the draft rankings, all things NFL draft, baby, for the next 3 months. Theo, it's the best time of year. Thank you for having me on, as always.
Congrats on your continued success with that pod. If you are a fan of the NFL draft, make sure you're subscribed to the 2026 NFL Draft Podcast with Brett Whitefield and I, and then also Cody's podcast. You listen to all those episodes, you're going to know more about this NFL draft class than anyone in your fantasy league, guaranteed. We're going to see you back here. Next guest on Dynasty Life, another Cody Carpentier favorite, Alan Sislowski joining me.
Hey.
Who would want to miss that one, Cody? Who would want to miss that one?
I'm not going to miss it.
No, absolutely not. We'll see you soon. Stick with us here at Dynasty Life all off season long. We're going to help you crush your Dynasty leagues next season.